way we think about it though today is, can we make a team of 2 people, 3 people, 5 people look like what they were, what 100 people looked like 2 years ago, right? So, how can we make them more efficient, more productive, more scalable with less people? And that's definitely possible to do. It's not just AI, but with automation, we've been super successful doing that as well.
Well, Kerry, first of all, it's a pleasure having you on. It's interesting because I pride myself on being a long time search, discovery, product content guy, and you've got me beat by quite a bit in that arena. You've
Are you
spent
saying,
most.
are you saying I'm old?
You're just older than me. You're just older than me. That's all. No, you've just had a lot of experience here, and you've had a long history in product content, haven't you?
Very long. Yeah, for probably past 25 years. It's been
Wow.
pretty much what I've done.
Talk to me about how you got started
Yeah.
in PIM and that
Yeah.
arena.
So the first half of my career, I was the CIO for a very large global distributor. So I started on the business side. We had
Were you
millions of
really? I didn't know that.
company called Marshall Industries. We were the third largest distributor in the world of electronic components. So
Oh, wow.
Avnet, Arrow, and then the company I work
Marshall.
for, Marshall Industries. So, and we were dealing with, in that industry, you deal with millions and millions of SKUs. And we were, this is even pre-internet. We were struggling with how to do quoting, how to quote it. Usually you'd get a fax of a bunch of part numbers, and you had to sort of figure out what they were and cross them to whatever you were going to quote on, and blah blah blah. So we were trying to figure out product content and product content solutions in the late 90s, early 90s, and eventually that evolved into Marshall Industries being the first B2B e-commerce website and company in the world.
Oh,
And
wow.
we then got better. We developed solutions. We didn't have a PIM. There was no such thing as a PIM at the
Back
time, but
then.
product catalog. And eventually, Marshall was purchased by Avnet, another global distributor, and left to start my own company. And that's where I started working purely in product content and PIM. We developed the company developed what is now called a PIM. Back in the day, you were creating automation for print catalogs, essentially. Eventually, there were websites, and then PIMs, and our company was sold to another company called Enterworks, and then I stayed on with Enterworks for 20 years, where we became the number one PIM company in the world.
Hmm.
And then we were bought and sold 4 times, and after the last sale to a company called Precisely, I stayed there for a little while and then left to join Bluemeteor, and been here for the last 3 years.
I don't think there's a lot of people that actually know that history of PIM, that PIM really started as a way of automating print catalogs, right?
That's
Adobe InDesign integration. Wasn't he? Probably wasn't even InDesign back then.
right. It was Work Express, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Work Express. There you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
Quark Express. Yeah,
Work. Yeah,
right.
that's all we did is and in fact, it was interesting because that kind of connects me to this, to Bluemeteor. Originally, to do that, we were storing data in a database to create these Quark Express catalogs. Well, all the data was stored in Quark Express, which wasn't a database. It was just pages,
Pages. Wow.
and so I reached out to this company in Chicago that was called Byte Managers, a guy named Sanjay Argawal, and
Wow.
said, "Hey, it looks like you guys can scrape data off of PDF pages and put it into a spreadsheet. Can you do that?" And yeah, I don't know if he really could do it yet, but he said he could.
He was a good entrepreneur. He said yes.
Yes,
Yes, I can.
and that's how we started working together. I would
Oh, wow.
send them these large catalogs because we had to get the data out of them, and got them into our system. And yeah, so
So
that's
for everybody listening, Byte Managers became Codified,
correct.
and then Codified was sold to Pivotry, and then Bluemeteor came out of that acquisition where some of the software was not part of that acquisition, and the software you guys used, right? We'll get back to it, but the software you guys used inside of Codified to work and the people that worked in, you actually used that and created the company Bluemeteor. We'll come back to that. I think it's well, and the problem really, I think the problem's probably more complex, but the problem's the same, right? Where you have trying to feed a catalog,
It
get
is.
the data for a catalog. Back then, the companies all prided themselves in the largest catalogs in the world. I remember Granger and MSC fighting for who had the thickest, not the largest, the thickest catalog
Exactly.
in the market. I remember everybody saying we have the largest catalog, and someone needs to measure that. Some of those still exist. Some of those still exist today.
There's still, yeah, in fact, it's pretty regular that when somebody's calling us up and want a solution, that one of the first questions they ask is, "Can you create print catalogs? Can you create flyers? Can you?"
Mm-hmm.
It's still relevant. Maybe not the super big ones. Maybe they're more specialized or personalized, but
Sure.
people still like print, or they like to read something and not that's not a website. So yeah, it happens all the time, actually.
So explain. So Sanjay codified to Bluemeteor. Kind of
Yeah,
explain some of that and some of the reasons you felt it was necessary to have a company around the problem you're solving.
yeah. So Sanjay, which you described, was the founder of Codified, and Codified was in the business of helping companies enrich product data, build taxonomies, improve data quality. They were a services company, and they, at the time when this whole internet thing started, they were really one of two or three here in the U.S. that were just focused on that. And that job is, as you can imagine, it's a very manual job.
Mm.
And what he had a team that was offshore who helped do some of it. He had people here who were coordinating part of it. And so over time, in order to be more efficient doing this, he started building software around how to manage product content, how to onboard product content, how to distribute product content, in order to make his company more efficient and work better and be more coordinated. And over time, he started as well implementing PIM and MDM solutions. And he was noticing that these customers needed the same sort of software that he needed internally to complement what they were doing in the PIM. And so he started actually licensing the software to a lot of these companies who were using StevoStep or EnterWorks or Informatica, and had built a fairly large software company within Codified doing all this. They didn't sell outside of their customer network. They just sold within, to their customers. And when he eventually sold the company to Pivotry, he was able to spin out the software side of it, which eventually became Bluemeteor. So Bluemeteor from the very beginning was all about product content. It was built by people who really understood the product content problem. They understood the solutions that were already out there that were being used. And yeah, and he, started growing the company from that perspective. And that's when I joined. So we were a partner of his. I mentioned that earlier. So Enterworks was also a partner of Codified. And so we had been talking, and I started to see some of the software that he had developed, and I actually started sharing that even with my colleagues at Enterworks and elsewhere to say, hey, look, this is like really cool stuff. And like, we don't do this at Enterworks. I haven't seen anybody do this stuff, because he was focused more on the fringes. So, everybody's really good at sort of the data management piece. He was focused on how do you get data in really effectively, how do you onboard data, how do you normalize it, get it into a catalog before it gets into the PIM. And then he was creating software to more easily syndicate the software outside the PIM. Those were weaknesses of Enterworks. And so it seemed like it was also a weakness for some of the other PIM companies, because he had sold the software to these other PIM companies as well. So that's what attracted me originally to Bluemeteor. And that continues to be what really ends up in differentiating us in the market, as well as these really cool tools for onboarding product data and syndicating product data.
Also, I mean, it's worth noting. I mean, it's a relatively incestuous community on the vendor side, but it's worth noting that some of the greats that we all recognize as voices for product content came out of Codified under Sanjay,
Right.
Jason Hine, Vivek, Nicole,
Yeah.
over at
Yeah.
Granger. I
Wow.
mean, some really great, some of the top voices in that talk about data modeling and taxonomy and product content and PIM. Came out from his leadership in that company.
You're right. I mean, I run into them. I'm shocked, because I literally run into people who had worked at Codified,
Yeah.
who were experts in this field on a weekly, monthly basis. I mean, you're right. And a lot of them have landed not at other consulting companies. A lot of them are like leaders now at Granger or
Yeah.
MSC or Fastenal, wherever. And it was pretty amazing what he did.
Yeah. Truly tremendous. I, I want to talk about this product content is one of those operational problems that still gets put. Well, I guess two things happen in my opinion. You can tell me what you think. It either gets put at the end of the project as a back, it's not the first thing you do. It's often the last thing you do. Um, or it's ignored because people just it's such a big problem. It's one of these giant problems. I mean, especially when it's because you have scale behind it, right?
Right.
There's millions of SKUs potentially, millions of attributes. Like, how does even one think through the idea of solving that and making
Yeah.
making improvement? But the first problem of operational, like, there's so many companies, especially integrators and agencies, that don't recognize this as big of a problem and need to be up front in the project versus on the back. Like,
Hmm.
forget about PIM, like just having some semblance of, hey, we've got a catalog and we have to have some coverage in the catalog, doesn't really get thought of until the end in so many
Hmm.
projects.
Hmm.
Do you agree with that? Are you still seeing
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I think it certainly, for companies who are going through this the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they've invested heavily in their e-commerce stack, and they launch the site and they look at their product pages and they're usually disappointed because they think that it's going to get all fixed just by improving the page layout or something like
Right.
that,
Or
or
search.
search. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's probably the number one thing we still hear a lot
Mm-hmm.
is our search is terrible. Why is it terrible? And they're looking at the search technology trying to figure out why it's so bad,
You're like, we
and
don't have a description.
it's the data.
you
Yeah,
don't have, you don't have a title or description or attributes.
yeah. So, but it's changing over time. It's not. I mean, I wish everybody thought about it first. It's
Mm-hmm.
certainly not at that point. But I think that people have run into this enough times now where there is a focus earlier on the product information. And a lot of times it is the first thing that a company is doing, or it's part of, if they're doing a large, replatforming type of deal, and they're bringing in a new e-commerce system, we're brought in a lot of times at that point now as
Mm-hmm.
well as part of the project. So it's not, yeah, it still lags time, more than I'd like to see it lag, but it's definitely a lot better than it used to be, where it was always ignored until the end, or until it was too late. So
How do you guys think through, though? Like, it's one thing to do a project up front to create the catalog. It's another thing to 6 months from now, things are outdated, new products introduced. Like, how do you think about the continuation of that over
yeah,
time, over years, not in a project format of doing ecom, so I need a catalog, with X amount of products in it.
yeah. So I think again I think that thinking has matured somewhat, because when somebody actually ends up bringing us in, they're usually they're looking more for a process than
Mm.
a catalog, right? So, they're coming to us and they're saying, I need product data, but I also need a way of keeping it up to date. I need a way of enriching it. I need a way. So, I think people are looking at it more systematically and what they need to do to keep the data up to date. It's still harder than heck without automation, especially. But I think people have been burned enough where they've, maybe paid for a catalog, or they did it one time and then a month later their data is completely out of date as well. So again, I think, maybe by the time they're talking to us, they're thinking about it from more of a holistic process perspective, and their goal is to make sure that they're keeping the data up to date, and in sync. So
Can you talk about the different sides, that, like, what a manufacturer has to deal with differently than what a distributor has to deal with, or a retailer,
yeah,
because they're,
yeah,
they shouldn't be this, they're not the same conversation. Sometimes
yeah,
have similarities, but like, talk about the differences.
yeah, yeah. It is. I think it is quite a bit different. So the manufacturer typically is the origin of the data. They own the data. They make the data. They're responsible for creating the data. Now, they struggle with that, and that's where a system like ours can help them with the process of internal process of creating that data and managing that data. But ultimately, they're mostly concerned about, okay, having good data so they can distribute it. They want to get it out into the marketplace, into their sales channels, and they want to keep it up to date for those sales channels. So the manufacturer, while they care about the data and they want to have a system that helps them orchestrate the internal management of the data, their biggest focus is, okay, how do I get it out to the market and up to date? Where the distributor has this, incredible problem, if you will, where, they don't own any data. None of this data is originated, or very little of it is originated internally. So they are reliant on getting it from somewhere, directly from the suppliers, from data pools, or aggregators, from scraping data, from creating it themselves, which usually means they're copying somebody else's data. But they don't own the data. They don't own they can't dictate any of the rules in terms of when they're going to get it, what format it's going to come in. They're invariably getting the data in the same, from the same category in 5 different formats, or nobody calls the fields the same name. So they have this huge sort of nightmare of trying to aggregate all this data and then standardize it, so that it doesn't, by the time it makes it onto their website, it doesn't look like it's coming from 100 places or 1,000 places. And then at the same time, making sure that it's, the quality's there, the consistency is there. So yeah, it's not easy, that's for sure. But that's the difference. The distributor's worried about getting the data in, standardizing it. They need to get it somewhere. It's usually to their website, or to maybe a marketplace. The manufacturers, okay, got to get my data put together, but I want to, my goal is to make sure it gets to as many places as possible in the highest quality standard that it can. So
I hear you saying it's like on the manufacturing side, it's like one to many. On the distributor side, it's many to one, like trying to pull that. What is are there large differences that you see between this B2B industry versus the retail B2C brand retailer industry?
mm-hmm. Let's talk about on the distributor side. I'd say there's a lot of similarities, B2C, B2B, between a distributor and a retailer from a pure product data perspective, and the challenges that they have in terms of aggregating data and normalizing and standardizing it. It's interesting. Nobody typically comes to us and says, calls us up and say, I need a PIM. Usually they're calling us up and saying, the data on my website is terrible, or I can't get, I'm having a hard time. My process is manual. I'm having a hard time getting, they're describing their pain points usually when they're calling us. And, typically those are going to be pretty similar, B2B and B2C. Now, sometimes when you're looking at it from a B2B perspective, the data can be more complex.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work with companies who do build to order type of products, because you see that a lot in B2B as well. So I'd say the challenges from a product perspective can be more challenging on B2B to B2C, but the problem is the same, if you will.
That makes sense to me. And probably in taxonomies, I've seen too, the taxonomies are just more complex and broader and deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially on the distributor side, that is. So trying to fit a manufacturer's product into a taxonomy, like where does it go? Where does it fit? What attributes need to be filled in? There's so many more places it can go versus.
That's right. And a lot of the the distributors we work with, they've created separate websites for the different constituencies that they're working for. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a contractor website for a certain industry versus, another type of tradesperson in another industry. So the way they need to categorize it and organize it and sell it is completely different from depending on who they're selling to, which you don't see as much on the retail side. It is more standardized and normalized on the retail side. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges. And then, you also, we tend to think about product data from an e-commerce perspective. But, each in B2B, you're using the data for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
Supply chain, quoting, AI, that's a big push right now. I need good data for my AI initiative. So while there's some of that on the retail side, cross references, crossing, the merchandising that you do maybe on the B2B side can be more complex than what you're doing on the B2C side. So there are differences, but in general, there's a lot of overlap as well.
I think one of the other issues is just that, if you get something wrong in B2B, someone could die. I mean, the stakes, I find it interesting because I think product content, gets emphasized more in retail and B2C as the kind of the sexiness of the product content, right? The
Mm-hmm.
images
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Yet in B2B, the importance of the written words on the page
Yeah,
are so much more critical in B2B than they are in B2C. You get the flow rate wrong or the wrong chemical
yeah,
that flows through a valve, and it's harmful.
yeah. I would agree. I think it depends a little bit on the industry as well,
Yeah,
right? So if I'm selling food products and I forget to put, that there's peanuts in the product or
sure,
something like
that's true.
that,
It's the same
so there's
thing.
allergens and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, maybe not as much in apparel, but there are certain B2C categories where the data is
That
critical.
mimic that.
Healthcare, some of the healthcare. But you're right. In general, it can be difficult. And, and the other thing with a lot of the B2B products, it gets down to even each state has different regulations in terms of how you describe things and what you can say about things and what you have to show about things. And that puts a huge, that makes it a lot more challenging on the distributor who's selling into all these different areas as well. You don't probably see that as much on the B2C side either.
Yeah,
So
that's probably true. How do you guys think through? You mentioned buying groups earlier. How do you guys think through, you know, distributors and I guess both sides,
hmm
manufacturers pushing to buying groups and trade organizations, distributors aggregating? Uh, I mean, I think,
well, yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, there's definitely, so again, you have to sort of separate it, manufacturers and distributors. But if I'm a distributor, everybody's trying to, I'll call it endless aisle, which is really a B2C word, but everybody wants to have more products on their website. And, they may not be inventorying them all. They may be, but they may be still trying to sell them online. And so what you're seeing a lot these days is companies are trying to more and more go to an aggregator, to a buying group, if they belong to a buying group, going to an industry catalog and sort of bypassing all the other ways of getting the product data and getting it from the aggregator themselves. And in order to just onboard that data, it's a challenge.
Hmm.
But now what you're seeing is, because of this sort of endless aisle strategy, I'm not sure what to call it in the B2B world, but endless aisle for B2B, they're getting their data from multiple aggregators. I'm going to this buying group and I belong to this buying group. I'm getting my data from this third party and I'm getting it from my suppliers. So the challenge now on the onboarding side, even if you're tied into an aggregator, is usually it's not just one these days, it's
Hmm.
two or three. And now how do you have the same problem all over again? How do you normalize the data? And usually you're getting millions of SKUs from these aggregators or hundreds of thousands of SKUs. And it's people are still trying to do it in spreadsheets and database scripts and everything else. And it's you can pretty much tell when you look at somebody's website when they're having these challenges because it's just, you can't find the product. Usually the first sign is you can't find the product on the website because, the search terms are different between the aggregators. There's no commonality. So the PIM software, the onboarding software helps address a lot of that through automation, makes it easier to do.
I think what happens in a lot of those cases is people just go back to manual. I mean, it goes back to the codified. They'll get files, they'll ship them to a content factory overseas, get those files prepared, bring them in. I mean, and that's weeks and months of
Yeah.
activity on those versus automation.
And it's expensive to
And
do
it's
that.
expensive, yeah.
Back in the day when I was first doing this, it was the billion-dollar companies who could afford to do PIM
Mm,
and product data and build websites and stuff like that. And then over the years, it's gone smaller and smaller. Now you have a 5 million, $10 million a year distributor, $20 million a year distributor who is trying to compete against all their larger competitors, and they're doing it online. They need this data. And they can't afford to send files out to third parties and do all
right.
this stuff. They just so you're right. It's either try to do it manually or buy a tool that helps them do it. So, but you see a lot more of the even the smaller distributors purchasing tools to help them do all of this stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about Bluemeteor. So you guys are a software company. How do you kind of describe yourself in
Yeah.
this space?
So right. Yeah. So we help companies with the end to end. What we just actually were talking about, the end to end process of onboarding, managing, and distributing product content. And we try to help companies automate as much of it as
Mm,
possible. Our goal sometimes when you tell our customers, our goal is hopefully you never even have to go into the PIM.
mm,
Because if you can somehow automate the end-to-end process, get the data in, automate the mapping and the transformation and the enrichment, and then get it to the website or wherever it needs to go, that's like the dream, right? The dream is I don't need to go into a PIM. They want the PIM just to do the work for them. So, but that's what we try to do for customers. We try to help customers automate as much of the process as possible. If they don't have a PIM and a DAM, we're their PIM and DAM to do this along with the additional automation. If they're using a PIM or an MDM solution, then we're able to augment their process and help sort of with both sides of this equation and just plug into their MDM or PIM solution and do that. So yeah, so that's basically what we do. There are, if the company needs additional help with the product data or consulting around the product data, we can help with that as well. But we try to do as much of that through the software and through automation as possible.
How are you guys leveraging AI in this product content space?
Yeah, so I mean, this industry in particular is, if you're not focused on AI, you're probably not going to
You need it on
survive
your website. I mean, for
very
sure, you need it on your homepage.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You need to at least say AI. So what we've done and it's interesting, Sanjay was a believer in AI way before Gen AI. So he had
Mm,
built in AI capabilities into the product 5 years ago. I mean, and interesting things like, tell me, tell me what my taxonomy should be,
mm.
or do all these really cool ideas, and they've just gotten better since as AI has improved, and now we have Gen AI. And so what we do is we try to look at every function, manual function that a customer does, and we try to see if we can't replace that function with AI. And we've done quite a bit of that already. So a lot of the manual mapping work that somebody typically has to do if they're onboarding data or scraping data from PDFs. We talked about how people get data. A lot of that was completely manual before is now all done through AI. And we're on this journey to see, this dream that I was talking about where people never have to go into the PIM. Can we get there all the way where, the PIM is actually just doing the work and, the data is coming in, doing whatever it needs to do, and then it ends up wherever it needs to end up. That's where how we're trying to leverage AI as well.
Do you guys do you guys work more on the distribution or manufacturing side or both?
It's probably 60% distribution, 40% manufacture. And, a lot of our manufacturer customers have come through relationships that we have with either distributors or buying groups or associations. So it's pretty, it's interesting. A lot of the manufacturers we work with, we also work with their distribution channels and vice versa. So a lot of times they learn about us through their existing supply chain partnerships that they have as well. But yeah, it's about 60-40, 60 distribution, 40% manufacturing.
When I first heard of Bluemeteor, I was trying to build a connector inside of Granger, and they basically said, yeah, the one company's already built a connector, and the connector was like, it was weeks. It was done weeks earlier than the connector that I was trying to get built. Put it that way. It was very, very fast. Like from start to finish, I think was, just a few weeks, not a few months like ours took, which I think is an interesting part of what you guys have done.
Yeah, I'd say, if I compare this engineering product team to some of the other ones I've had in the past in similar spaces, they've done a really good job here of architecting the solution so that it's not just reliable and scalable. It's uncanny how quickly we're able to get things done as well, whether it's integrations like you described or new features or whatever it is. Me, there are several of us who came from the previous company I was with, and we're always saying, wow, how did we get that done so fast? Because it would have not happened that fast in my prior life. So yeah, it's a good feature to have. It's all of us, and I think a lot of that is as again it goes back to some of the new technologies that are coming out. The Sanjay and the Bluemeteor team have really stayed on top of their technology stack and what it means to be a modern solution. And that allows us to be more agile and go faster as well. So yeah, it's, hats off to them. They've done a great job with that.
Can you respond to something that I've heard kind of rumblings about? Maybe it's companies saying it about themselves or whatever, but it feels like people are starting to think of AI as a magic button that you push and things are solved. And yet we've spent, most of this conversation talking about the complexity of this whole world and how difficult of a problem that it is to solve. And even with your amazing software, it's work to make sure it's done, right? Like what's your thought on kind of general AI solving this problem with some kind of easy button versus having subject matter expertise in the middle of that to help figure it out?
Yeah. So I think if there's a combination of things that have to go on, and you're right. I mean, everybody thinks of AI as that magic button, but it really doesn't work that way. And even when we think of automation, only one component of it, it's AI. There's a lot of other types of automation that go on in our system to kind of make this whole thing work, where if we just relied on AI, we'd never be able to do what we're doing. So, maybe more of that goes away over time and it's pure AI, but today automation encompasses a lot of things, and a lot of times people even categorize that all as AI. It's not really all AI. But we always talk about having the user in the loop, because a lot of what the AI needs to do, you still, either you're training the system or it still takes people reviewing and looking at things. And so, where the dream is nobody ever has to go in the PIM and everything is done automatically. The reality is that, people are still having to review things and, answer questions and give, that domain expertise that you described is super important in terms of being able to, really differentiate the content and get it to where it needs to be. So, yeah, again, who knows where that will be,
Sure.
3-5 years from now, but today that human in the loop, that domain expertise is critical to the process.
I mean, I think even if you do like a simple task using AI and go scrape a website, like see the results that you get back. Like,
Right.
yeah, you'll get a large percentage. It's worth doing, right? It's worth using automation to go get data and match it, but you won't find perfection in the scrape. You'll get wrong. You get things in the wrong spot. It'll think a word means this and it means something else because it's an industry word. Like, even just a simple example, you never get to 100%. You need that check in there to verify.
You're right. The way we think about it though today is, can we make a team of 2 people, 3 people, 5 people look like what they were, what 100 people looked like 2 years ago, right? So,
Fair.
how can we make them more efficient, more productive, more scalable with less people? And that's definitely possible to do. It's not just AI, but with automation, can we do that? And we've been super successful doing that as well. So I think, it's again, that's how each of these, when we're working with a company, their differentiation is their domain expertise, whether it's around their business or their products or supply chain. So the more that we can plug into that, the system can plug into that, I think it's, the more differentiated that business is. And, our goal is just to make them more efficient doing that. Way more efficient. So,
Kerry, what kind of customers, or for the people listening to this or watching, who should be picking up the phone and calling Bluemeteor? Like, what kind of problems do they have?
Yeah. So again, if you're, some of the symptoms that people are struggling with is their processes for handling product information, whether it's coming in or managing it. If it's manual, it's all being done in spreadsheets. It's, custom coded in some scripting language, database language, and it's not efficient. That's certainly an area where you can call us up. If your website, you have a great e-commerce solution, but your website still is difficult to use because customers can't find your products, or you're losing deals because the content on your competitor's website's better than yours. Those are reasons people call us up as well. And it's or I'm trying to get my data to more of my sales channels, but I don't want 1 million people having to create custom assortments and uploading into templates and getting it. These are all very manual processes that people typically call us up and ask for help from us. So it ranges to, some, we work with very small organizations to some of the largest distributors and manufacturers in the world. So our solution and our company scales very well with companies of all sizes. And yeah,
I think what I hear the most talking to people that are interacting with you guys is how much you guys understand the industry. You guys truly do. I mean, especially like in the easier areas of industrial and electrical and electronics and all these aspects that are so complex. I just hear all the time that you guys understand that world deeply.
I think so. I mean, that goes back to Sanjay and the heritage of the company. I mean, really the DNA of our company is product information and understanding it, especially in the B2B world. Really understanding these B2B categories that you mentioned, and understanding and being able not just to sell something to a company because you understand it, but really able to solve problems.
Solve real problems.
Yeah, our people are. I mean, I think our people are problem solvers. That's the way we look at it. So, and having that knowledge and that DNA is, that makes it possible for us to do.
Kerry, thank you so much for the conversation. It was amazing, and I do really enjoy your company and your personal company and the organization of Bluemeteor, and I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last couple of years as well, Kerry.
Appreciate it, Justin. Thank you for the opportunity. That's great.
Manufacturers, distributors, leaders in the zone. If you're building B2B, this the podcast throne. The industry's heartbeat, we're setting the tone. Turn insights to actions, it's how empires are grown. We're talking change management, breaking resistance. Strategies so sharp, they redefine persistence. Customer adoption, it's more than retention. It's building a movement, commanding attention. It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow. We bring news, big topics, insights to spark. From the boardroom's glow to the warehouse dark. Digital transformations, the path we're paving. Helping you lead through the change you're facing. This is more than a podcast, it's the industry's voice. Giving you the tools to make the right choice. No fluff, just facts, no hype, just action. The show where solutions are more than a fraction. It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow.
This is your guide to the digital race. Practical advice, no time to waste. So tune in, gear up, and let's own the space. It's the B2B e-commerce show, the industry's base.